Hello, I'm Lady A for the Vampire Lounge, and right now we are sitting at the Boutique de Vampire in New Orleans, and we are here to interview Gabrielle Faust for the Halloween weekend. The Boutique de Vampire is at 712 Orleans Avenue, like right behind the St. Louis Cathedral. And we have a few questions to ask you. Are you ready?
I am.
Good. All right, first one up is, you are an extremely diversified and talented artist. Please tell us some of the creative fields that you've worked in.
Well, I actually have quite a bit of background. I did about 12 to 15 years in the advertising industry, doing marketing, graphic design. I've also done custom illustration for about 15 years. I also have a background in fine arts. I was an abstract painter for many, many years. I've also done surrealistic paintings, did galleries in Houston, Austin, and various different cities around the country for a number of years. But right now I'm primarily focusing on my writing.
What led you to turn away from the advertising world to the more disciplined world of being a writer? What were some of the challenges in making that switch, do you think?
Well, I've always been a writer. Writers go back centuries in my family, literally centuries. Playwrights, poets. So it's in my blood, and I've always been a writer since I was little. However, what kind of led me to branch away from the advertising industry is it's not a thankful industry.
Right.
It kind of chews you up and spits you out. It's 70-hour work weeks with very high demands and very little return. And I was, unfortunately I have to say this, even though I still do graphic design, but it's freelance now. But the advertising world is one in which you go into and you're creating all of these amazing creative ideas for companies that you don't necessarily believe in. It was completely killing me, and so at one point I sat back and I said, what is my passion? What is it that I really want to do with my life? And this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to paint, and I wanted to write, and I wanted to tell this story that I was working on, the vampire story, and that was what I wanted to do. And when I started to actually transition out of the advertising agency world, it was a difficult process because I was going from a very, very structured corporate environment into basically back into what I was in college.
Right. Let's talk about Eternal Vigilance. Your book deals with futuristic society where vampires are in a power struggle with a controlling empire. Does the myth you create have anything to do with the current political upheavals you see taking place in the world today, or does it have more to do with your past professional experiences of working in the corporate world?
Well, a little bit of both, but primarily it does have a lot to do with my own views on world politics. I started working on the Eternal Vigilance novels when, and yes, I'm very anti-George Bush. But when he first came into the administration, the world just started falling apart, and that's when I started really working on it, and I was wanting a platform to not only explore the idea of the rise and fall of a new empire, which really America is the new Roman Empire. And I've always been fascinated with the rise and fall of empires and civilizations, how they rise and they always fall, and they always seem to follow this cyclical path, and they always get to this apex of greed and power and what can we get next, and it's always their undoing. And I was beginning to feel like we are at our apex. We're going to unravel. This is the fall of the American Empire. Exactly.
What was the foundation for the main character, Tynan? And what sets Tynan apart from most other literary vampire characters?
Well, Tynan is kind of a mixture of a lot of people that I've met over the years. A lot of, growing up in Austin, I've met a lot of people, a lot of activists who have battled against the system and battled against administration after administration, and philosophers and filio-religious, explorers who have tried and tried and tried and tried again to find peace within this world. And they've never actually managed to do it. I've met a lot of disillusioned souls. I've met a lot of jaded intellectual people who have just kind of lost their way, and they want to believe. They want to believe in something. They want to believe. They want to be inspired. They want to believe that there's hope, but they just feel like they keep hitting a wall every single time they try to go up. The system or the world or whatever it is smacks them back down again. It's it's an accumulation of all of those people that I've met over the years, and it's a little bit of my own self as well. I mean, he is kind of he is quite autobiographical in the fact that many of the conversations that he has with himself, many of the internal ordeals that he goes through are conversations that I've had with myself about the world, about politics or religion or just society in general, of wanting to kind of remove themselves at one point. These are all conversations that I know I've personally had with myself, and I know that there are a lot of people who have had that conversation with themselves, and I think that is what kind of sets him apart from other vampire, characters in literature, and that he's not your typical,
Lestat,
vain Lestat, exactly.
Right.
He's not your Dracula. He's not your Lestat. He's not your Nosferatu. He's not your True Blood characters or your Twilight characters. Thank God. Just saying. He is more human than most vampire characters. He's carried that with him, and these are spiritual and philosophical and religious burdens that he carries with him throughout life, and he's always searching for that way. He wants to believe that humanity's not doomed.
Right.
Even if his own vampire brethren tear themselves to pieces, he wants to believe that the world is not doomed to repeat itself. And yet for century after century,
He sees the same thing.
He sees the same.
Vigilance is a series of books. So far, you have written 2 books. Please tell us a bit about where the first book takes us and how the second book follows through, and the next book that is yet to come.
Well, the first book actually starts off 100 years after Tynan wakes up. He wakes up after 100 years sleep, I should say. And the world has transformed into a very post-apocalyptic, very fractioned society where a technological dictatorship called the Theist Empire has risen up, and their main goal at this point in time, after global conquest, is to become immortal by resurrecting a vampiric god that has promised them eternal life. And this is like their chance at becoming immortal without becoming a vampire. And subsequently, they have slaughtered the vampire race because they found out about the vampires. And so there's been a mass genocide on the vampires, and then there's been a mass genocide on the rebel uprising that is trying to take down the empire. And so these two outlander rebel groups have banded together, and they're trying to stop this final outcome. So that's where they start out. And this is Tynan. It's all told first person through Tynan's eyes. Him experiencing this new century, him experiencing this new world, him being drawn into the rebel uprising. And then in book 2, he's actually in the midst of it, and he's being pulled into full-fledged into this, attempt to overthrow the government, basically, which is what it is. It's an attempt to overthrow the government, and he's in the middle of it. And then the third book, which I'm 3/4 of the way done with, and it should be out mid-next year, hopefully, will be the completion of, I'm not going to tell you how it ends.
Of course not.
But whether or not he's able to thwart the Theist Empire from succeeding in their master plan. And then there's 2 books planned after that. There's going to be the continuation of what happens after the culmination of this war between, you've got the vampires and the remaining humans whom have banded together for a common purpose, but what happens when your common enemy is gone? What do you do with each other, predator and prey?
Right.
How do you establish this new society? And then the other book that I'm planning is going to be a prequel, which is going to be exploring Tynan's life from the time that he was immortal all the way to the time that he goes to sleep, which in that time he was a filio-religious leader amongst the vampires, and it was basically his rise and then his disillusionment and what happened afterwards.
Going to ground and just checking it all.
What made him give up everything and walk away from the religion that he had created.
That sounds really interesting. I think people are going to like to read about what happened before. You know, all these things happen. Everybody loves to get a prequel.
That's right.
Yeah. What happens? We don't know. Okay. So that concludes our interview, and we have been talking with Gabrielle Faust at the Vampire Boutique called the Boutique de Vampire in New Orleans for Halloween weekend. And I'm Lady A with Vampire Lounge.